All right, well, welcome everyone. Welcome to Ramsey County Board Workshop. Today's workshop is titled Community and Economic Development Meeting Workshops, with the focus on River's Edge and Wright Creek Commons. A quick courtesy reminder that this board workshop is recorded and it is live streamed on Zoom webinar. There will be no votes taken during this workshop. So let's start with introductions of commissioners and presenters around the table, and then the rest of the room. Rena Moran, Ramsey County Commissioner, District 4 Chair.
Tara Jabin Singh, Commissioner, District 1.
Mary Jo McGuire, Commissioner, District 2.
Mai Tong Chan, Commissioner, District 6.
Garrison McMurtry, Commissioner, District 3.
Kelly Miller, Commissioner, District 7.
Josh Olson, Community Economic Development.
Claudia Klickhammer, Community and Economic Development.
Carrie Collins, Deputy County Manager, Economic Growth and Community Investment.
Lynn Becker, County Manager.
Clemens Barron.
John Massatello, Deputy Director of Public Works.
Ron Isaacson, Public Works. Mike Rogers, Public Works.
Ellen McDermott, Community Economic Development. Marie Vaughn,
Christy Cox, Planning, County Manager's Office.
Alex Kitson, Chief Operating Officer.
Lily with Government Relations.
Sam Brock, Illinois Chief Engineer.
Ellen Larson, Goff Public Lobbies for Ramsey County.
I'm John Yates, also at Goff Public.
Leader Abdi, Deputy County Manager, Health and Wellness Service Needs.
Megan Nyholm, with Communications and Public Relations.
Miller, Senior Policy Analyst and Office of Chief of Staff.
Your top officer.
All right, so thank you. So this workshop follows the launch of Building Stronger Together to provide updates on two of Ramsey County's major development projects, River's Edge and Rice Creek Commons. These two projects are key components to the county goal of building a dynamic downtown and selling county-owned land. Through these focused mini workshops, the county board will hear how the Building Strong Together strategy is being activated and implemented through the ongoing planning, development, and execution of these two transformative county-led projects. With that, I would like to turn it over to our presenters.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, I'll just give a quick intro to this, I guess, new style of workshops. We've got two kind of mini workshops, if you will, 45 minutes for each. And the intent is not to necessarily get all the details about each project, but it's to get you up to speed on kind of where things are at, with the idea that this becomes kind of a multi-part series, that we come back, on some kind of regular cadence here and provide yet another mini workshop in a few months to keep momentum going on the projects, and so that you can all see what staff are working on, what's advancing, and where there may be obstacles. And so we've got our redevelopment staff here. We've got other staff here with various expertise that are prepared to answer your questions. And so I'm going to fall back and let the kind of revolving door of folks come through, and I'll turn it over to Director Josh Olson.
Thank you, Commissioners. Good afternoon. I hope today's briefing across these two mini workshops will give you a bit of a deeper dive into a number of the elements that our teams, both in community economic development and public works. So as much as that we put up there, it's a CED, community and economic development mini workshops, we really do believe that these are shared projects between our two departments. Today we'll, as Chair Moran already mentioned, we're focusing on two of the high-profile projects led by your Ramsey County team. Each of the projects are important and certainly centerpieces of these two elements outlined on your slides for building stronger together. Building a dynamic downtown, where you'll hear more about the River's Edge project, and selling county-owned land, which is where we talk about other projects across the county, including the big one out in Arden Hills, Rice Creek Commons. But I do want to take a moment just to preface this by saying these two projects are large projects for us, and we're working on them. We're working on a number of other things too. These two sites represent key places, but we also have other projects, smaller in scale in many instances, across the rest of the project. And so we're excited to kind of bring forth those updates at future mini workshops, where we can talk a little bit about how we're positioning those projects as we move forward, how they connect with other elements, whether they be programmatic or other department work. So really, as I said, these other efforts kind of still fall under the large umbrella that is Building Stronger Together. And you even saw earlier this morning at your board meeting, an element that is not led by Ramsey County, but where we will be very involved in, because it is an element that helps further many of these projects in the case of the Kellogg Bridge in downtown. So again, trying to kind of, no pun intended, bridge across all these pieces. Thanks for the sound effects, Brian. But also as we kind of begin to illustrate how we at the staff level, but also through our partnerships across community, are kind of working these projects forward. So with that said, and certainly Commissioner Jevon Singh kind of prompted this a little bit with the wheel that she brought in earlier, which we appreciate. Building Stronger Together, certainly, as we work through the myriad of issues that are associated with these two central projects, but the other projects that we'll mention, we're rooted and grounded in these other plans. So that includes the Economic Competitiveness Inclusion Plan, our Climate Equity Action Plan, our All Abilities 2050 Transportation Plan, as well as the Transit and Transportation Investment Plan, and sometimes often also connected to the Transit Improvement Plan program. So all of these projects are rooted in those. We work on a daily basis, sometimes on an hourly basis, ensuring that those projects are aligned with the core tenets of these particular plans. So with that, I'd like to turn this over to Claudia Klinkhammer, who is our redevelopment manager and our project lead for Rivers Edge, part of Rivers Edge.
Okay, thanks, Josh. Good afternoon. I'm Claudia Klinkhammer. I'm here with Mike Rogers to talk about Rivers Edge and give you some updates. So we'll start with just a little bit of background. I know many of you are already familiar with this project, but just like to kind of ground us in some of the major milestones and things that places where we've been with this project. So Rivers Edge really began with the adoption of the Gateway to the Mississippi River Plan back in the late 90s. The county board officially adopted that really with the vision of reconnecting downtown to the river. The county took the first steps toward this vision with the deconstruction of the Ramsey County West building and the Adult Detention Center. That work was substantially completed in 2017. And those are the buildings that you'll see on the screen in front of you there. The next step in the process was to find a developer. And through a competitive solicitation, AECOM was selected as the respondent whose project most closely embodied the bold vision for the project. Notably, their proposal included developing the entire site. So that includes both the infrastructure, the park, and the towers. That, of course, was pre-pandemic, and a lot has changed since then. AECOM's completion of the schematic design phase in 2025 completed their obligations to this project. We have submitted a state bonding request over the past few years, and we were successful in receiving $6.22 million in an appropriation in 2023. And so I referenced earlier, the bold vision that resulted in AECOM's selection to be the developer of the site. And the overall project vision really remains unchanged. I think it's important to note that this vision that you see in front of you was developed with partners, including the city of St. Paul as a key stakeholder. Building Stronger Together helps us to maximize the site's development potential by removing many real and perceived impediments to private investment at the site, with an investment in infrastructure, public pathways, and accessible connections to the river. It is accelerating the project by providing resources to advance work with the railroads, which allows us to connect people to the river. And critically, it's important to remember that while we often talk about this as a park or infrastructure project, it really fits into the Building Stronger Together initiative to increase tax base. Investing in public amenities is not a new concept. Couple examples: in Greenville, South Carolina, A $13 million public investment resulted to restore Riverfront Park, produced over $100 million in private investment through condos, hotel, and retail in just a year and a half after that investment was made. Another example is Detroit's Riverfront, which returned more than $1 billion on an initial $140 million investment in that riverfront. So I think the question then becomes, how do we get to the part where we can start talking about the returns that the county is making on their investment? And so in this section, we will talk about how we are removing the impediments to get to the return part. So we are going to be focusing on three major critical path items, and these often have long lead time activities. We have completed the schematic design. I mentioned that already. That happened in April of last year. In April of this year, you approved and signed the initial agreement with Excel to relocate transmission towers. So that's another one of those long lead time activities that'll take about 24 months to get to completion of that particular part of the project. And then just last week, you all approved and signed the preliminary engineering agreements with the railroads, another long lead time activity. So we keep this momentum going by focusing on three major areas. We will advance design, we will identify private involvement, and continue to work with the railroads. For design, schematic design, as I mentioned, was completed a year ago. The next step in this process is to identify a new design firm. This will be a large contract, and we will bid it competitively through a multi-step process to make sure we find the right design firm to work with. In this process, we will explore alternative delivery options, which can streamline the overall timeline and result in cost savings. So we'll be looking to identify the design firm, hopefully by early next year. And this involves releasing a solicitation later this year. Noting that due to the high value of this contract, it will take some time to develop the RFP to make sure that all needs and scopes are considered. It is worth mentioning here that we are working with Public Works and Parks in this process, as there are many talented individuals working at the county who can be tapped to support this process and project to make sure that we are building a project that does improve access and connectivity to make it easier to get to and move through downtown. This group will be tasked with designing a space that activates key spaces to create destinations that draw residents and visitors. So we expect to bring this to the board later this year or early next. So the next area of work is to identify a private developer. Full realization of River's Edge includes participation from a private developer to build the vertical towers. A competitive process to attract a private developer will best position us to have a strong pool of respondents. Working with CBRE, a national real estate brokerage firm, will ensure that we capture the full breadth of possible private investment. The role of private developer is an important one as we sharpen our pencils in both design and financing of this project.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Yeah, I just have a quick question what are some of the goals for the tower development, the vertical tower development? Is that office, is it residential? I mean, do we have a specific, or is that to be determined?
It's somewhat to be determined. I mean, it's definitely density remains a key goal. Activation at the street level as well to really, make the park a destination. In terms of actual uses, that will really be left to the market to tell us what is a viable option right now. I think housing, certainly we'd love to see on the site, and our sense is that will be one of the first towers to be developed. But in our process to identify a private developer, we're going to have the market tell us what pencils at this project.
Commissioner Chevin, I just would add, one thing that we did do as part of our exercise in the prior version of the design is a little bit of not quite a full fit test, but a really a high level fit test on what the towers where they would be located, as well as their kind of capacity. So the way that this site is laid out, which is a little hard from images that you see up there, but it's kind of like a trapezoid almost. And so there's an area on the western side that's a little bit larger, which could accommodate a larger footprint that may be attractive in a marketplace for office or hotel. And so I think as we go into that next stage of the process, we actually have a lot more flexibility in the way that when we go out to the marketplace, in part because I think we're going to demonstrate both our willingness to, to partner on this infrastructure, but also that we've done some initial fit testing for the marketplace. So they don't have to come in with like a blank slate. They literally can come in and understand like, this is what is kind of the outline of what I could get, what I could build. And then they can start to look upwards as opposed to outwards in terms of how they want to look at the buildings on there. So yeah, I mean, certainly areas of the site are definitely geared towards certain uses, residential being one of the most flexible of those. And we anticipate, as Claudia said, that being probably where the market will lean heavily towards. But I think having a mix of uses here will be helpful to us achieving a lot of goals related to the project.
And then just a quick follow-up is that given the collaborative nature and the momentum that's going on in downtown St. Paul with many of our different partners, including in the private sector, what kind of role do they have as far as, getting out the word about this development opportunity, about helping us recruit the inappropriate developer, as far as, again, encouraging people to apply for this process, and even informing what they see as they are doing other projects in downtown would be a nice complement within this tower, because these are evolving and changing things, right? I'm just curious at how we're leveraging those relationships and that expertise beyond our own county staff, for the betterment of the project.
I'll start by saying, I think we're in a critical moment for downtown. And I think there's a lot of energy that's, pointing towards what offerings can be here. I did not hear this directly, but I've heard it from others who have heard from other developers that like St. Paul is actually an interesting place to tackle some projects right now.
In Minnesota, interesting.
No. That's good clarification. That's the Denver in me. That's an interesting, it has been like full of potential and opportunity. There is, because of our announcement, Building Stronger Together, I think the marketplace is now starting to understand that there's some seriousness here. The mayor and the city have certainly put forth some of their work, and as well as the downtown groups, including the downtown Alliance. And so there is energy here. And from my experience, developers and investors follow energy. And so this is us kind of positioning in a right place to talk about it. That's not without the challenges. There's, a lot of headwinds in global real estate markets. I'm not going to dismiss those. Tariffs and interest rates will continue to be some of our hardest things to overcome because they're global and in their scale. But that said, when local stakeholders are aligned, markets tend to move in that direction.
Thank you. Commissioner McVicker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To kind of piggyback off of that conversation around some of the partnerships, looking at what we envision with this project, especially when it comes to the housing piece, are we currently, is this area zoned to where we need it to be, or is there additional updates to zoning that will have to go through the city to get approved?
So there are some zoning pieces. So it's a bit of a unique site. There's actually a couple of different zoning zones on the site, and we are working with the city to address those to make sure that there's consistent zoning across the site. I mean, there will be entitlements needed that the private developers will need to secure, as they would with any development project. But we are, doing all we can to make sure that the site is ready for that, and to remove as many barriers for that as possible.
Great. And in conversations that you all have had so far with your counterparts at the city, has there been any potential red flags or concerns raised with what we're presenting here and some of the potential ask around zoning that's coming down the road?
I don't think there's anything that's concerning. I think there's several knowns. As Claudia mentioned, you know, some of the zoning needs to be clarified. There's a historic height district on one corner of the site that prior staff and folks along the way have said, you know, this is a zoning change and a zoning change update is certainly necessary because it's not in full alignment with the comprehensive plan. And so usually though, that's a pretty natural piece to kind of update as things come along, as projects move towards exactly what they're proposing. So no, I don't foresee anything that is a major hurdle. But process is process, and we have to go through that. And so there's some things that we're tackling as Claudia's already mentioned a little bit, that we're tackling ahead of when the private developer is on board. Again, to remove that impediment, make that relationship and that response from the private sector pretty seamless and straightforward. But there will be process, and those processes, as we've heard from some folks in the community, will still involve community engagement in a very, you know, traditional way. But we're going to build in other opportunities to kind of get the word out and understand the kind of elements of the project.
Right.
Madam Chair,
Another, just a clarifying question. So, it's always exciting to think about this possibilities here. Do we, we're open to multiple developers, maybe not multiple would be a lot, but more than one developer here. We're not needing to sell the whole property as one, and we absolutely convinced that we should sell rather than lease it. I think we've had this sort of conversation before with some, you know, certain entities think you should never sell, you should never get rid of really great property, you should just lease it. But anyway, we've had that conversation and we've already, that's not any, it's no longer for discussion. Is that right?
So actually, I would say that's not totally right.
Oh, okay.
And in the sense that, so like the alternative, traditional alternative to just straight up selling the land is like a long-term ground lease, right, as an alternative. And it changes the revenue streams and it changes kind of how the money shows up in the project.
Okay.
And so depending on what is proposed, right, and that's why identifying private developer is kind of our next priority, because that will help us to start to answer some of these questions about financing, about how we do leverage our Building Stronger Together investments to make sure that we are getting the best deal. And so, you know, it might be land sale, right? It might be, you know, if you know, we're able to, you know, get you know, and we need that investment up front because of what we're learning that the project needs, because of how things are going with railroad negotiations, kind of all the parts and pieces need to come together before we can say, yes, this is exactly what we're going to do. And so I think there is a question and we're going to hopefully come to that answer sooner than later.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Just for, okay, go ahead.
Oh,
Commissioner Zone.
Yeah, I just had a question about overall, and speaking of like, well, it's a public-private type of relationship here too. With the schematics of it was somewhere here, like which parts are going to be the parts that the county will be like responsible for ongoing, and which parts are going to be where it's owned privately.
So do you ongoing like in an operational? So the county, well, and actually I wonder if I could come back to that question. There's a diagram later in this that will show a little more clearly. Okay,
Great, thank you.
So just for clarity, probably just for me, but what do you mean when you say vertical towers?
So, I wish I had this in this now, but so there's the infrastructure that will be built kind of into the bluff. And then there's the park and the lid that sits on top of that. And then the vertical towers are going to be at Kellogg level that will sit on top of that infrastructure and be privately held.
Privately held and operated.
Yep.
Okay, that's what?
And developed. So that will be, we don't, but it might be housing uses, it might be hotel, it might be office, kind of those.
Clearly, okay. All right, thank you. Go ahead.
Yep. I'm going to maybe pick the pace just a little bit here. And so maybe to return to question earlier, in terms of marketing. So we are going to be partnering with CBRE, which is a national real estate brokerage firm, to ensure that we capture the full breadth of possible developers for this site. I think that we're going to cast our net wide, but that is not to the exclusion of leveraging our local partners. And I think that, both we, the county, have a role and our partners do in making sure that we have strong applications from and responses from local firms who really know our market. So the role of the private developer, as we've been talking about, will be very important, as we figure out design and financing the project as a whole. I think just in terms of timing to, Josh alluded earlier to some of the work that we've already done in terms of designing and fit plans and understanding the site. And I think similarly, that's going to make us very competitive and very attractive to private developers. Additionally, I think the timing of building stronger together could not come better in terms of releasing this RFP and as we seek private investment. The holistic strategy of investment in downtown signals to the market that we are serious about this project and supporting downtown as a whole. And I think that's something that's going to be really, really appealing to private investment. The strategic investment will reduce risk specifically, which is a huge attractor for that long-term investment. So the search for a private developer is scheduled to happen along a similar timeline for that of design. The developer will have a vested interest in the design of the structure on which their investment will ultimately sit. So they are distinct tasks, but they will definitely be related. And I think that the timing of both is good in terms of project synergy and making decisions as we move forward. So future board actions include a recommendation and possible presentation to the board of a developer at the end of the year. This might start to, and final approval of board developer in early 2027. And with that, I am thrilled to turn it over to Mike to share updates about
All
railroads.
right, thanks, Claudia. I get to talk about trains. So a lot of this you heard about last week, commissioners, when you approved those agreements with Union Pacific and CPKC. So railroad negotiations really make a ton of sense to fall to the Regional Railroad Authority because, well, one, it's a railroad authority. It deals with railroads, but two, it also has some history with this, with the Union Depot and getting Amtrak trains and other passenger rail service back to Union Depot. So a good history with the railroads of working together and having strong working relationships that have benefited us going forward and helping MnDOT implement things like Borealis and working with Amtrak as well, because we know we have freight railroad backing on things we're asking for. So we want to continue that. Like, that's one of the key pieces of how we want to approach this, is maintain good working relationships with the railroads. And part of that is trying to identify what do we need to accomplish with this work. And it's really two things. It's going to be real estate and it's going to be engineering. And we need to identify which staff at the railroads make the most sense to work with so that we can address the issues that they raise as well as the issues that we raise jointly, so that we can come to common agreement. And then identify what future agreements are really needed for the project to proceed. I know we did those preliminary engineering agreements with both railroads. That's step one. There's multiple steps we have to go down the road to. The next big one is going to be a memorandum of understanding. So thinking.
Commissioner Jesse.
and I'm not sure exactly where's the best place to ask this, but when I look at the diagram that was earlier, that talks about what the potential design of River's Edge looks like, and it's that overhang over the, how common of a design is that? I mean, is this a brand new unique project that only us are trying to do this wild and crazy thing, or is this pretty standard? Or I'm just curious, have other folks tried to have such a bridge where the trip over railroad tracks?
So, Commissioner, it's unique and it's not unique at the same time. So lots of places have wanted to do this, and lots of them have been able to get to okay, you can do something, and then they may not have the money to do it. When we were down in Omaha, that's one of the things we heard from working with UP folks down there, is their initial plan when they redid the Jean Leahy Mall was to essentially do a big cap over the railroad tracks right next to the river. And ultimately they built 3 bridges because they just didn't end up having enough money with all the other stuff they wanted to do with that mall to allow that capping. In Calgary, there is a large cap in downtown over the CP tracks there, so Canadian Pacific, now Canadian Pacific, Kansas City, CPKC. And a lot of places, Seattle's another one, where they have done more of a mixture of a larger cap, but more bridging, and essentially it's a cap with some holes. And that allows them to go between their waterfront and their downtown. So it's not necessarily that it's unique, it's more of, do you have the resources to really pull it off? And a lot of that is part of the railroad saying, okay, how serious are people? And I think this building stronger together, how we've worked as a rail authority with Union Depot, how we've worked as a county to push some of our transit projects and work with them, shows that we're really serious about this. So in particular, working with UP, there was a lot of excitement of what this could accomplish because they'd seen how much had happened in Omaha with just the little pieces they had been able to put in place.
So in some ways, it's the balance of, we feel as if this is definitely doable as far as getting the approvals because other folks have gotten that far, but pretty special that we're the ones that are gonna take it over the finish line.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a great way to put it.
So I can visualize a bridge going over the railroad or something going over it. But what I can't visualize is the impact that may have on them being inclusive of the designs and other things like that. What do that look like? Can you talk a little bit about
So,
that?
yeah, Madam Chair, when we think about what is a railroad thinking about in this, they're thinking about, I have right of way right now or tracks right now that have nothing over the top of them, nothing really next to them structure wise. I have unimpeded ability to move anything I want through there, easy access to maintain. And now you're putting a lid over the top. So now I've got to think about, if I'm going to park trains there, where does the exhaust go? If I'm going to maintain in there, how do I get trucks in that may need to lift up the track or work on signal systems? Do I need clearance for booms? How much clearance do I need off the side of the track should something happen? So it's those types of things they're going to be thinking about.
Thank you.
Yes. All right, so I'll continue on. So again, we did those preliminary engineering agreements. We're gonna set the stage for the memorandum of understanding. Real estate side is, we all know what's out there today. There's 2 tracks or 3 tracks, just depending on where you're at. Canadian Pacific, Kansas City, UP, they run tracks on, or run trains on those tracks, but we don't know what the actual legal title is underneath in every spot, just because it's really old. And so some things may not have been recorded correctly, some lines may not be in the right space, so we need to work with their real estate folks. We're gonna more than likely need our own real estate assistance on this to say, what's reality and how do we make the underlying documentation meet that? Put that in place before then we can start to talk about, okay, this vision we have for River's Edge or the park at River's Edge, what does that take from a real estate standpoint to be able to buy air rights to go over the top? Do we need to move some lines around because we now have piers that are holding up the structure in specific spots and we want that on county property, or a railroad wants a chunk of property because they need a little bit more room for their maintenance facilities? So those types of things need to be identified going forward, and that type of, while we don't need the exact information, we need to know these are the things that need to be done, and that would go into a memorandum of understanding as well. So that's a non-binding document. It essentially puts a line in the sand or a stake in the ground that says, here's the decisions we've made up to this date, this is where we need to go. And so as staff change or other things change at a railroad or even at the county, we don't start to go back and try and revisit things, because that is one of the biggest hurdles to keeping things moving forward, is if you have people who constantly want to revisit. So there's that. So that we're thinking of trying to get that a good draft in place by the end of this year for a memorandum of understanding, board action, railroad action, late first quarter 2027. So then what? So after the MOU, again, that would document these other agreements like an engineering agreement, construction, operating and maintenance. On the engineering side, when we get through these preliminary engineering agreements, we're probably going to be at that 20% range for design. We're still going to need to take that all the way through 100%. There'll be milestones there. That's where the engineering agreements come into play. Construction, you still got to build it. Even once it's designed, you got to tell who's building what, who's responsible for what, and then what are you maintaining. So things like the Union Depot, we have operation and maintenance agreements with the railroads where we pay for some infrastructure on their track already that they wouldn't have but for the need to get a train into the depot. So say Union Pacific had to take a switch that didn't exist, which is where you can cross from one track to another. They didn't need that before because there was no access into the Union Depot. Now it's there. So we need to pay them to maintain that infrastructure because they wouldn't have it but for us. So those sorts of things need to get worked out. And then we would have the real estate, specific real estate agreements that would talk about how's land changing hands. And then how are we reimbursing them for any air rights that we need to acquire, just to make sure that everything can keep going forward to get this project to become a reality.
So since there'll be a lot of different decisions along the way, and to your previous concept of memorializing things so that we're not revisiting them constantly, do you anticipate then that our body will end up having lots of little pieces along the way to approve, so that again, you don't have to do everything in its entirety, you check boxes as you go through and hold?
Commissioner, yeah, that's the engineering agreement is gonna be a binding agreement that says, this is what we're gonna do. This is who's responsible for each specific piece of it. And that would be something to come to the board for approval. The board would then approve a construction agreement that would say we had to do something or they had to do something because we're gonna be putting the bill for some of it. And then the same for operations and maintenance. So yeah, every step of the way, it would be coming back to the board for approval.
And I really appreciate that sense of kind of setting the groundwork for us to know how much of that and why we're doing it, right? I mean, so that again, to your point, lots of moving parts, this is really complex. We want to make sure that we continue moving forward.
Okay, and so I think that's the very reason we're doing these mini workshops. They're supposed to feel like just a chapter in a longer book. And so along the way, you're getting kind of these updates, and you might see something show up at a regional rail authority, then a few months later, we, are doing another one of these. They're gonna feel somewhat incomplete at times because it's a thing that's gonna take a lot of time, and we can only tell you parts of the story as it goes along. So it should never kind of feel like some of the other workshops where we have bookends. It's just gonna be a continuous story. So,
Well, and considering how many partners we have, how much, all of the different pieces to this, the transparency of that and the allowance for, and we haven't written this chapter yet. These are the people who will have to come on board to help us with that, allows us to keep moving even as we're finding the way forward. So I thank you for this opportunity to learn like that.
Thank you. And I believe with that, I turn it back to you, Claude.
All righty, thanks, Mike. And I think that's actually, I appreciate that bookend, that idea, because this section is called county sources, but I think really, we wanted to just take a moment because I know we've been getting a lot of questions around, the transportation source in particular that is going to be going into River's Edge. And so just wanted to spend a little time to kind of talk about that transportation investment and kind of how that will look and what we know so far. And then, a little bit what we don't know, right? Like we don't have a budget where we can say assign dollar values to individual lines yet. We are working on that. We will certainly get there, but just, wanted to spend a little bit of time talking through this. So Building Stronger Together calls out transportation as the main county source at $100 million. And this number consists of regional rail authority, TA funding, and local sales and use tax. So about 70% of that $100 million transportation funding number comes in the form of the rail tunnel and structure over the rail line. And so the vast majority of it is for infrastructure related to the railroads. The remaining funding will be a combination of TA and sales and use tax, which will pay for the vehicle tunnel, multimodal trail, including ADA elements, a potential transit station located along Kellogg, and a small percentage of the portion for the parking ramp that is needed to carry that pedestrian trail from the river to the bluff. So the park at River's Edge, it's really a pedestrian land bridge that reconnects downtown St. Paul to the Mississippi River, creating accessible walking and biking connections and a welcoming public destination. So this project will bring new housing, retail, and workers to create density, just a short walk from Union Depot and multiple transit lines. Parking is integrated into the base of the structure and not a standalone ramp. And there was a question earlier about operations and kind of all the parts and pieces. And this is the diagram I wanted to share to kind of articulate that a little bit more. So you'll see the kind of yes, okay. So the public realm is kind of everything that's on the surface here. And so this, will be a county park. The private development, you can kind of see the suggestion of the towers here, and the parking below will service those tower uses. And then the rail investment will come, and transportation investment will come by way of these tunnels going over the railroad tracks you can see here, and then over Shepherd Road here. So they're kind of 4 distinct pieces of this project. So hopefully this diagram helps just kind of articulate the way that the project will be sliced and diced, in terms of responsibility.
So this is beautiful, but it just seems so expensive. What do you think this may cost? Any idea?
Yeah, well, so for the public investment right now is approximately $168 million. And so that includes the investment in the tunnels, and it involves an investment for the park on top as well.
Okay, McGuire, so we can bridge.
Some of the diagrams we've seen have actually gotten us to the water, so is that, we're just not seeing it there? Where we can actually zigzag
Yep.
to the water, so
Yep.
that's just not, we're just not seeing that right here.
Correct.
Yeah.
This is just a cross section,
Yeah.
just to, yeah.
So, right, so we actually do get to the water at some point.
Yep, there is a trail that comes
Yeah.
off, yep, that we'll get.
That
us.
will get down there, okay, thanks.
Okay, Mr. Zhang.
Yeah, thank you. So if I'm hearing you correctly, then that parking structure then would be a part of the private development then. And then also for that lid that's over then that will be the public realm that the county would be responsible for. I guess, are we building in, like ongoing operations and maintenance and capital expense? Because today we just passed a big, letter of support, right, for how much the Kellogg Bridge is costing. So I'm just thinking ahead about like long-term maintenance of this lid.
Yeah, yep, it's a great question, and one that is definitely at top of mind. Our parks partners, certainly need to weigh in on that as the project moves forward. To date, it's still fairly conceptual, and I think that operations, it's something that the county may lead on, but it's something we also may look to, other partners in downtown to help support us on. There are, a number of organizations, St. Paul Parks and the conservancies that already do work in parks along this area. And so I think we need to, have parks, weigh in from an operational and programmatic perspective, because I think that both of those are key pieces to the ultimate success of an urban downtown park.
But to the key about the capital, about the lid, about the actual structural, would like regional rail levy dollars still be eligible use of that ongoing?
Yep.
Okay, yep, then I would definitely consider, encourage for considering how we have a capital fund. Yeah, that gets built into that.
Madam Chair, one thing I wanted to just add to what Commissioner Zhang was asking about operations and maintenance side. So and I'm connecting the dots with what Commissioner Jevon Singh asked about what precedents, what other projects are we looking to, for examples. So this is where we aren't necessarily unique. There are other projects across the country who have tackled this question about how you layer on public realm parks over the top of infrastructure in some really dynamic places. And so in dynamic situations. So Clyde Warren Park in Dallas, Texas is a great example where they built what is arguably one of the highest performing meaning number of people who visit a park in downtown Dallas over the top of I-35. Wow. Folks even in Dallas would say, I don't know if this is necessarily our best example of where you can put a park. But because it is anchored by so many important things in downtown, it's a great example of how you can program a park, you can make it active, And you can build in the creativity as well as the opportunity that comes with having a private partner, as well as kind of a private operator, because their goal is to bring people. They want active spaces and places just as much as we want active places and spaces at our parks. And so that's a great example. The DC waterfront is and Wharf is a great example of this. Certainly we're Seattle along their waterfront, where they've connected around anchor institutions, but also private development as a way to kind of bridge over what are some physical impediments and challenges, but also to instill and add value. And so this is an example, and yes, we don't have the full answer to the question of operations and maintenance here yet fully tweaked, but as we step into that next layer of work related to our partnerships with our private partner, as well as our other downtown boosters and key institutional partners, there's going to be a lot more opportunities for us to kind of explore how to make this work. Again, I think because we all have a common goal, which is we want it to be active. That's key.
Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair. Knowing that we sadly didn't get the bonding dollars this legislative session, how much of a setback is that on the timeline and the progress that we're hoping to make with this project? And knowing that our investment has become kind of a signal to the market that we're serious about this, does that also have an impact, the lack of the state funding dollars, does that have an impact on, showcasing the seriousness more broadly to the market?
So I would say it does not. It doesn't change our timeline. It would have been great to receive $20 million from the state. And it's one of those kind of tricky lines we toe right between saying like, yes, we need your money, and we can't build this project without it, and also we are going to go no matter what. And so I think that is a gap that exists, but I don't think that it's certainly not enough to stop the project from moving forward on the timeline. And I think that it's something that we can certainly find ways to make up. I think right now we kind of plugged in a number that represents the private investment. And I think, additional negotiations and around that, that is one place that we could easily, look to make up some of that difference. I think there's many ways that we can approach the project and make changes in order so that that $20 million isn't really felt in the overall scheme of things.
I was just gonna say, related to that question, I think that's why it was so important that we added within the package, the capital bond, that's the county's money, because that will be more of the flexible tool we have. So I know we're not addressing it here today, but that's gonna be something that comes to the board probably fall-ish time. So I think that gives us a new tool, and that comes from, us being good fiscal stewards and being able to leverage our borrowing power too. So while, yes, nice to have the state, we also control our own destiny in some ways with some more ability to have flexibility that we can generate for ourselves. So thank you.
On that, just as a follow-up to that too, is just because it didn't happen this year, this project's gonna be a multi-year project. We can go, I'm assuming our request will be made again in some things, or no, a bonding request. I suppose that's for us to decide.
Yeah.
What I mean is
The
structurally
work has
with
been there.
the work and the potential for future bonding asks around this project, the door is not closed because this wasn't the year. The question that I had was, I just want to make sure that I'm not overstating as I'm understanding the complexity of this project. When you talk about the questions that Commissioner Zhang had around the capital fund for the overall infrastructure that's underneath the park, but then also the park operations and maintenance of the surface level things and programming and all of that, and the potential for public-private partnerships and all different potentials with other public entities, or things like that. The question, I just want to make sure I'm not overstating. What I'm hearing you say is there are multiple options that have been demonstrated to be successful avenues forward in many areas in other cities. What we have yet to determine is to narrow down which one will fit ultimately our project. It's not that, gee, we don't know. It's that there are, depending on how the project unfolds, depending on the partners on the table, depending on how things comes together, there are multiple ways for us to choose. I just want to make sure that I'm stating that clearly and not over my skis.
Is that correct?
That is correct, and I like the analogy over skis.
Well, and I think the last thing I'll just add, and I think Commissioner Ortega was helping me understand, is, if the goals around residential and downtown come to fruition, it's kind of like the chicken or the egg. I mean, you have to create places for people to want to live, so you can have them living here. If we are collectively as partners get, an extra 20,000 residents into downtown, some of the things that we think are costly, long tails of expense just kind of start to naturally figure themselves out because the tax base will be stronger, we'll be able to, like just generally all the rising tide raises all boats at that point, right? So it kind of is, all the things have to kind of move together. And so that's why the building stronger together had the housing component as well. So I don't know if
Yeah, thank you, County Manager Becker, because I think that's what we were trying to very clearly illustrate with Building Stronger Together, is that one singular element or one singular project is not going to change everything. But by us investing in supporting infrastructure, whether that be housing or at the street level, supporting businesses and vitality pieces are all things that create a wonderful place where people will want to live, to work, spend time and dwell. I just read an article just in the last week where they're identifying cities where they have the longest dwell times, which interesting correlates to really, really robust downtown business districts. And so I think us kind of as a county, as leaders and with other partners, investing in those core tenants will be ways that we elevate projects, be they the project that we are talking about today here at River's Edge or projects across downtown.
Okay, all right. Embassy zone, and then we're going through.
Yeah, thank you, thanks, Madam Chair. I just want to say thank you for bringing forward this, because a lot of the questions that I have gotten as someone who represents, the east side and its connection to the downtown areas about, wanting to build, spaces where the public can access our riverfront, right? And that, the easier option that I heard from a reporter when we unveiled the Building Stronger Together, which is like, why not just sell off the parcel? Well, you could easily do that and let the private market take care of it, and they can just build industrial type uses. And that is what we have seen with the private market too, with the use of the riverfront, right? Where that vision does not come to fruition, and we absolutely need to be in this role, one, because we have both the land, but then also the public-private partnership, both like even having the conversations with the rail, right? No private entity would be able to do that. So in this instance, it's very fitting that Ramsey County is the one to lead in this space. Otherwise, we're going to continue to just have the status quo of not having access to the riverfront and not having that river block that we see in all these other cities. And also what residents have been saying for a very long time about just wanting to be closer to the river and activating that space. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just a quick,
We're really gonna move on to.
just a quick, which is also, and I'll say Commissioner Zhang, the idea that the multi-pronged approach and very pragmatic approach of investing in development and selling lands, because we just down the road, the big building that we just started the sales agreement for. So the idea of it's not a one shot, and I appreciate that the folks around this table are thinking about that idea, that it's kind of a little dollar cost averaging, right? You know, how much do we let the public have and how much do we let a public investment versus private investment in a multi-tiered approach to the riverfront and the land that we have at the county. So it's not a unimind. It's like we realize that we're gonna have to have every possible tool. So it's not, you know, we have to think of the totality of our approach here.
So as we transition, we opened up by saying that this was the gateway, it used to be called the gateway to the Mississippi River, which I really like. Because I know this legislative session, we have folks who saying, why are we gonna do just another park? Right, and so as we move into the future, let's think about that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And how we
Yeah.
move forward in language around what we're trying to do here. Okay, we're gonna move on to Rice Creek Commons here. Yeah.
Changing the
theme. Welcome.
Yeah, so I'm Ella Mitchell, redevelopment manager, working on Rice Creek Commons, and then John Mazzatello will be supporting me in 2 slides here. Talking about Rice Creek Commons, I think we're sort of seeing this as part of the selling county-owned land, part of building stronger together, though of course there's a lot of other projects, as we've mentioned, you know, this is not the only one, it's just one of the bigger ones. So a brief overview of the Rice Creek Commons vision. So the vision for Rice Creek Commons is to create a vibrant, inclusive, and sustainable community with much needed housing and well-paying jobs. That was created by the Joint Development Authority. So that JDA is the partnership between the city of Arden Hills and Ramsey County, which oversees the redevelopment of Rice Creek Commons. And just sort of reminding ourselves where Rice Creek Commons is, as you can see, you know, it's at the close to the intersection of I-35 and 694, you know, close to, I guess Shoreview isn't labeled on this map exactly, but you know, it is in Arden Hills, but New Brighton, Moundsview, and Shoreview, you know, all definitely are affected by it, as well as the rest of the county. And with Rice Creek Commons, we do have 2 parcels we talk about, so I think we've been to the board over the past year or so about Outlet A a lot. So that's this part marked in red on the north part of the site on the screen. So this is zoned for corporate campus, commercial, retail, industrial. And so the goals there really align with that zoning. So that's where we're looking for jobs, tax base, land sale proceeds, and then sustainability, which is for the whole site. We are working with Ryan Companies on that, which they were selected through a request for development interest a couple of years ago. There's 40 acres there and it's really development ready. And so, you know, Outlet A is kind of on a faster trajectory than the California parcel, which is it's shaped like the state of California, which is why we call it that. We always have to remind people, but sometimes we forget. And so that is really, you know, it has the broad range of zoning there. So residential, commercial, industrial, retail, public space, there'll be parks and trails and everything. So we really are seeing that as a live, work, play community. We do not have a developer for that at this time. And the infrastructure will be providing an update on that shortly. So I think before I hand it off to John, I think one of the ways we wanted to set this up and sort of align Rice Creek Boulevard with Building Stronger Together is this is one of the major ways that we are preparing the site for private development and investment. And so moving forward with site preparation and the construction of this road, we really think is going to be an important step towards attracting development to the site. So John.
So now it's my turn. Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Mazzatello, Public Works Department. A quick background on Rice Creek Boulevard. This used to be referred to as the Spine Road, if some of you are familiar with that term. It's a little bit over 1.2 miles, about 1.25 miles of 2B County State Aid Highway going from County Road H on the north, which is the existing roundabout at the southern tip of Outlet A, south to County Road 96 on the south. We are proposing that to be predominantly a 3-lane section which is one direction of traffic, one lane of traffic in each direction with a center lane for left turns. The northern portion of the boulevard would be 5 lanes, and that is where the town center is located and more of the heavier commercial use where traffic numbers are anticipated to be a little heavier than the rest of the corridor. The scope of work for the upcoming project, we'll give a little timeline on that project in just a minute, is the site preparation work and the installation of the Rice Creek Boulevard infrastructure. That would be the roadway, all of the public utilities, multi-use trails on either side of the road, as well as stormwater management features for the natural resource corridor and a regional trail along the eastern boundary of the California parcel, connecting the park to the north to the County Road 96 trail network.
I just said, oh, Chair. On this map, this is the green square that is abutted to by Shoreview up top. That's to the east of the California parcel. So many folks in community will just see this whole square and think Rice Creek Commons because it's very open wooded land. But the project is really just this west corner. And the reason why I just wanted to ask, can you just identify who are the other owners and users of that area? Because I think it's confusing for folks to understand who are our partners, meaning our neighbors. I should say not necessarily our partners, but the neighbors in that space.
Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, so there are a variety of neighbors. The biggest one is the federal government. So the Arden Hills Army Training Site, often called AHATS, is the largest portion. So just to the east of Rice Creek Commons, so it's to the east of this red outline here, most of that is federal government property still, and it's where they do their National Guard training. So they have, an active facility there, which you probably have seen if you go to the Arden Hills Public Works facility, which is also in that the bigger green square. You'll see it's our neighbor there. There's also to the I don't know, is there a pointer here? Oh yeah, I'll just use this. So this area right here, so just north of the California parcel, is actually also owned by Ramsey County. That is reserved for parkland. So when that was transferred from the federal government, it was through an understanding that it would remain parkland. So that, I think that's not really the part of Rice Creek Commons itself, but I think it's part of the broader vision for the area. And then we have, this is where you'll be testing my knowledge, the DMV is right up above here. So we've got a state neighbor here. And then I think there's another MnDOT facility right here. And then there's one other square right in here, rectangle, that the federal government just sold to a private developer. So it was part of the federal government's property, and they just closed on that sale a few weeks ago. You might have seen it in the newspaper. So that was just a transaction between them and the private buyer.
So the reason why I asked that, one, is just because people kind of lump that whole section together, but then also the idea that this really is a pretty clean slate, with the California, our parcel lines don't butt up against established commercial areas or established housing areas or things like that. They are other, except for that one parcel that you just talked about that was just sold. It's really other government entities that have other uses that aren't, that are not housing, retail, light manufacturing, those kinds of things. So this is kind of a clean slate that we're working up against. Okay.
And Madam Chair, could I just do one more? Thank you. And just to let you know about conversations that those of us that are lucky to serve on JDA have, so that the green line to the right or the east, that's a regional trail, and that's existing now. That's not a new regional trail, right? Is that an existing regional trail?
That connection, Commissioner McGuire, will actually be a new connection.
It will be a new connection, because there is a regional trail out there, or is that just along the north
It
end?
sort of stops up here. Yeah, so there's a trail that comes out here, so then it'll.
So this will be the new connection.
Yeah.
So just so all of you know, because we do want a lot of pedestrian and biking paths here, and so when we were putting in the spine or the it's not the spine road, it's the it's the, what do we call it, the boulevard, Rice Creek Boulevard. You know, it's gonna be an all-purpose road, because the biking, if you really wanna bike and stuff, you're gonna use that regional road there, that's for the big bikers, the other's gonna be an all-purpose road that a lot of people can use, so. Just, they're just thinking about, we're all thinking about all these things that give the most mobility to the most people, so, thank you.
I just have a quick question about this. Has there been consideration for transit on this or future transit? And how we can build a road that can accommodate that for the future?
Absolutely, Madam Chair, Commissioner Jean, we're designing Rice Creek Boulevard to be transit ready. Since there is no line identified, we're making sure we have the capability to host stations, transit stops, transit connections along the corridor when that time comes. We're making sure the space is allocated.
Okay, that's great.
And on that, just on that point, so the line the A line, there's a dotted line from Rosedale to Rice Creek Commons in most of the transportation plans, and I think it's still there. Is it still the dotted line? No? Uh-oh, when did it leave? Oh, no, we don't want it to be. Uh-oh, so what do we do? Okay, we always wanted.
We could inject it back into the dialogue at any point.
At any point.
The issue was that there wasn't anything active.
Okay.
The land use patterns and such, so Met Council was looking at it from a policy perspective and saying there weren't enough things.
Wasn't enough, but it's.
So there were too many things on their list to put into the policy plan, and so they pulled a few things out. We could put it back into the.
But we can put it, so there's always been a desire to make sure that there's an opportunity for a link there. And we always had a dotted line, but I'm glad to hear that it can be put back at any.
And I heard John say yes to that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then just the last question is, how much is this for the spine road again?
The project that's being designed is a combination of site preparation and Rice Creek Boulevard infrastructure. So depending on how we class the different activities as being infrastructure related or site preparation related, the differentiation gets a little gray between the two. The total package we're looking at for the whole site and infrastructure is be somewhere in the range of about $63 million.
Okay, great. Yeah, well, thank you. And this is still a part of our Building Stronger Together package too, right? Okay, so in scale and of like what we supported in for the bridge today, then yeah, we're spreading it through the county. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Miller.
This may just be a silly question, but when we add to our county road systems, do we get more? Where does that funding go to maintain them? Is that just incorporated into our budget, the Parks and Recs budget, or is that more, do we get state aid for county roads, like how we get park dollars, or I guess I'm just,
Great question.
okay.
We have a county state aid highway account. We have a finite number of miles we can claim in that account.
Okay.
To get state aid dollars for. And we have our mileage designated on a map with MnDOT as to where those miles are. For this, we would have to make an additional mileage request,
Okay,
which our county engineer, Brad Estosian, and I are already working on, getting ready for that to happen as soon as we have a construction project in the woods.
okay, thank you.
All right, Mr. Mulvaney.
So some of the questions we were just talking about is a good transition into our next slide. This is a conceptual visual of what the 3-lane section of Rice Creek Boulevard could look like. So we've got the 1 lane of traffic in either direction. We have a shoulder off to the right-hand side of that travel lane. We have a boulevard that's landscaped between the travel lane and the bituminous trail, one on either side of the boulevard itself. Landscape median. We're working right now with the city of Arden Hills on lighting standards and landscape requirements and other appurtenances that would go into the right of way. But you see that center median where the left turn lanes would be, when this becomes a 5-lane section, the additional lanes would go to the outside. They would not consume the median. And this green space is the area where we were talking about transit ready, where the station could go, the bus stops could go, with connections to those pedestrian trails, which would have connections into the side developments on either side of the boulevard.
Can I just make one comment? real
Yes,
quick on that?
Commissioner Miller.
Kind of reminds me of the work that they just did on Highway 61 over by Phelan and Larpenter. vistas with their trails and the lighting and then the roads and making the center lane.
And this being as unique as it is, we have a very good opportunity of controlling where the utilities in the corridor go.
Mm-hmm.
If any of you remember some of our past projects, we've had some challenges in locating private utilities. We're developing this right of way from scratch. We get to control where those private utilities go
Very good.
and where they
Yeah.
don't.
Great. Okay, we're gonna try to move along and we can pose some questions that are posed.
Just real quick, the timeline for West Creek Boulevard. This fall, there's gonna be some initial site work done. We're anticipating putting a small package out to bid in about 6 weeks. You'll see some initial soil moving, some clearing and grubbing, some fencing. We'll be putting in a casing for the water main to go under County Road 96 and working on the abutments for the bridge over Rice Creek. If everything goes as planned, we should have a completed design infrastructure package by the end of the year that will be out to bid. Meaning in early 2027, when the ground is thawed, depending on the type of winter we get, we'd anticipate sometime in April, we would begin the earth moving for the site preparation and the early stages of Rice Creek Boulevard construction to be finished in 2028 and ready for developers to come in and utilize the remaining property. As with any other project in public works, we have the potential for unforeseen circumstances, things in the ground we didn't know were there, or coordination with other agencies, regulatory, watershed district. We're going to be in constant communication with Army Environmental Command over the groundwater remediation system, et cetera. But our team in public works is well versed in dealing with contingencies during construction.
This is nothing new.
We would be able to adapt to whatever comes up for sure.
Great, and now I'll talk briefly about some updates on the development approach at Rice Creek Commons. So for the California parcel, again, this is the large parcel. The image here you'll see is our zoning map. So this shows the different types of zoning we have. And the JDA is currently assessing a new approach to development. So previously, we had been thinking we would work with one lead developer, and that one lead developer would coordinate everything with all the sub-developers who would work on different areas of the site. Now the JDA is considering working with kind of 4 to 5 sub-developers, something in that range. We're calling it a hybrid development approach. Some of those sub-developers might even still have sub-developers, but it essentially would be breaking the site into 4 to 5 different areas, likely based on the zoning, so the development type. And the advantages that we're seeing to that are really that flexibility of being able to work with different developers with different expertise, speed. It is possible that development could start in multiple parts of the areas of the site at the same time. And then diversification, kind of that risk diversification. All of our eggs aren't in one basket. If there's sort of some challenges with the residential market, but the commercial market is going, or vice versa, or challenges with negotiations, those don't have to hold up the whole project. So the county and city staff have been working through some due diligence, and the JDA is planning to recommend a direction this summer.
Madam Chair. Yeah, I think this is really exciting. Some thoughts that come to my mind are just around a lot of the work that we have done around our emerging and diverse developers and those type of opportunities. And then in addition is if we have any sort of partnership or if the Metro HRA has been a part of the conversation, especially since, their focus has always just been about using vouchers. But then the challenge is always about finding the housing. And then in addition to that, the layering that's needed to get more deeply affordable units. That they may be a partner in this too, for adding more of our deeply affordable housing units. So they have been.
Sorry,
yeah, it's a question.
Sorry, yeah. I have not been in touch with Metro HRA about this specifically. I will say that it is standard in our agreements with developers that they have to accept vouchers. So they can't, that's something that sometimes developers try to do or landlords try to do, is say we don't accept vouchers, but that is standard that we always say, our developments have to accept those. So I think that as we start to identify residential development partners, something like Metro HRA and making sure that those development partners are experienced with working with those kind of vouchers will be important.
Okay.
And then a little bit of an update on Outlot A. So here is where we do have development underway with Ryan Companies. So we have phase one was microcontrol company headquarters. I'll talk a little bit more on the next slide. And that's at the northern part of the site on this diagram. And then phase two, we are in active discussion about what that might look like. So hopefully we might have some updates on that soon. And then just a reminder of the purchase and sale agreement terms with Ryan. So that was originally approved in January of 2024. It was amended to allow for this phase one of development last April of 2025. And currently it extends to December of this year. And so then we have an update on our microcontrol company headquarters. So this, as a reminder, I think many of you might have been at the groundbreaking last year. Microcontrol company is a manufacturer of electronic test equipment. This development will have office, research and development space, and manufacturing. It's a 157,000 square foot building on 10 acres of land. And they are just finishing up construction right now. They might actually be officially complete this week. I don't have the latest, but that was what they were on schedule to be finished by. And then we're excited to see how this aligned with county goals and especially the ECI plan. So they do have about 240 jobs at this location. The estimated market value of the completed building or completed site with the building will be $12.6 million. And then we did work with them on some, ambitious sustainability features. So they do have ground source energy there. It's an almost completely electric building, meaning that they use very little natural gas. They have electric vehicle chargers, they have rooftop solar. There's a lot of other little things, but those are really the things that move the needle on sustainability.
Looking forward to adding to our tax base.
Yes, definitely.
And just one quick note, I just want to say that knowing the last year and when the sustainability guidelines of the JDA were approved, there was very much a tone on our current JDA of don't let perfect get in the way of very, very, very good. We wanted to be practical, we wanted to be pragmatic, and we wanted to work with developers in a very changing environment with supply chain issues, with tariff issues, with just an uncertainty in the market. And one of the things that I think is really exciting about this particular project is that we work with the developer to make sure that they work with the company to make sure that they were future proofed against some of the things. And by doing that, by giving them that flexibility, by the time they were actually making decisions at this point, they did opt into those energy savings because the availability of product and things like that fell into place. And so having such high guidelines and matched with a pragmatic approach is pushing companies to lean into those sustainability goals that we have. So.
Awesome.
And that's a great segue into our sustainability clean energy. Yeah, perfectly teed me up. A quick reminder just that clean energy has been key to the project vision for many years. So from the beginning, the benefits as far as health, affordability, resilience, innovation, environment have been really at the forefront of this development. And so these sustainability design guidelines that we established in early 2025 really translate that vision into clear expectations for developers. So this is a list of the things that now developers are expected to do when they build at Rice Creek Commons. So we do ask them to do a sustainability certification, design their buildings with energy efficiency in mind, have decarbonized buildings. So we don't want natural gas or as little as possible, have rooftop solar, district energy is part of the long-term vision, things like electrical vehicle chargers, and then reporting on water usage and energy usage, things like that.
Very good.
And to that, we did receive for the project, Rice Creek Commons got Lead for Communities pre-certified at the platinum level, which is the highest level possible. So this is really a way to keep ourselves accountable. So this is a comprehensive sustainability system that looks at energy use, water, quality of life that the U.S. Green Building Council administers. So we did receive that pre-certification in March 2026, which basically says, we have the plans in place to get there, and we just have to show kind of the final evidence that these policies and plans will lead to the sustainable development. So we will begin that process later this year. So this is just a summary of what we talked about upcoming. We have our Rice Creek Boulevard initial site work beginning this fall, determining that developer approach for the California parcel. We're hoping to begin that this summer, and then ongoing development at Outlet Bay.
Any questions?
Madam Chair, I just wanna thank Ella and the whole team for all their great work. I get to sit on JDA now and just seeing all the amazing work and follow-up that you're doing, Ella, and the team, has been really great. So thank you for all that great work. And of course, my colleague, Commissioner Jevon Singh, who's a great force on that board as well.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I just also want to name, former Commissioner Reinhardt, who had been a big part of the sustainability goals, and having been on the board for the last almost 4 years now, of just making those approvals and having a big vision for what we would like that it's coming together to, and working with the practical needs of the changing financing environment of different tools that's available from the Biden administration to this administration, how those all affected us, and it's coming together. So just really pleased and just really thankful for the thoughtful leadership of our past board members who have served on the JDA.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Yeah, I just want to say, to say thank you to all of the background work that happens with staff, all of the Rice Creek Commons project, the Boulevard, all of this, there's a tremendous amount of technical expertise that goes into building a city from the ground up, right? So there's a lot of folks who we won't necessarily see at this table, who I know are doing schematics and then working details out and all that. And also, I just want to lift up the work of our municipal partner, Arden Hills. We have great representation, really a good collegial working in productive, constructive conversations, very engaged. So it's not just we're all there smiling and nodding. It's working through, wrangling, doing the due diligence, and that goes for the Arden Hills city staff as well. And so just thank you to that ongoing partnership with the city of Arden Hills.
Okay, and I just close by saying that been on here almost 4 years, and this has been a big conversation for most of my time here, especially around Rice Creek Common. So it's good to get a check-in about where we are, how we move forward, and where we are. And I just feel confident, I continue to hear the values that Ramsey County holds in the work that we do. We're not wavering from that, and feel confident as we move forward that those values that we consistently are important to us will be embedded into the work that we're doing. And so I just want to thank you all for your work and for your leadership. You're going to get out of here on time. Thank you so much.
Great job. Thank you.
Is that the takeaways? So, you want me to read the takeaways?
I can quickly do it, although Commissioner Moran, you kind of hit those pieces, but I just wanted to call out a couple of pieces. One is, even though the distance between River's Edge and downtown St. Paul and Rice Creek Commons out in Arden Hills are in different settings, they're different types of projects, they're different scales, that you're starting to see a bit of the common elements that exist across these projects. And Commissioner Zhang asked about emerging diverse developers as a program. I think we're trying to investigate all the ways in which we can bring our learnings and our opportunities and possibilities into these projects as we move forward. Thank you for calling out and thanking the staff here, Ella, John, Mike, and Claudia. who lead really a lot of the day-to-day work associated with this project. There's a whole host of folks behind the scenes as well, in finance, in procurement, in legal. There's a lot of legal on this one, on these projects, and so I just wanted to extend my thanks to them. And that you're starting to also see, as we've announced Building Stronger Together over the last a couple months now, that not only are we bringing more things to you, but we're starting to really identify those things that we said at the beginning, which is removing and addressing those impediments that have been present on the project and accelerating the projects to the extent that we can, to move them in a position where they are more development ready. A common theme, infrastructure is going to lead the way. And we believe will also, in many ways, prompt new and unique and different opportunities as we have conversations with private developers, as we explore ways to build and maintain projects. But you also are witnessing how infrastructure can be a really key linkage to sustaining and enhancing vitality in these spaces and places. And then lastly, I just say that ultimately our goal here and how we've framed this under the Building Stronger Together is that these projects, alongside of these other projects we hope to bring forth in the coming months with many more details, are, in the case of Outlot A, they're already happening, but we'll continue to grow and strengthen the tax base as we move forward. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thanks, good job.
Thank you.
All right.
Austin was number, I think, number.